Everyone. This afternoon, Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Moore Motley, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, uh, Mr. Kerry Simmons, will address a number of issues that have arisen over the past couple of weeks. Uh, Afterward, we will take your questions. Just remember to identify yourselves before you ask the questions. Prime Minister?
Thank you. Thank you, Roy. And this press briefing is really just to update you on the things that we have been engaged in since last I spoke to the media. As many people would already be aware, I took 4 days leave, which is the only leave I've had for the year, really. And then thereafter, I proceeded to receive an award from the United Nations Foundation on behalf of myself, and I claimed it on behalf of Barbados and small island states. Then on our way to Sharm el-Sheikh, we took the opportunity to introduce the new Minister of Tourism and International Transport to all of our industry partners in London as we overnighted in London on the way to Egypt. And I think I can say that engagement was extremely informative, but also extremely productive. Indeed, I think he will report back to the country on his own the substantive issues with respect to tourism that they have been able to work on over the course of the last week. I went to the COP27 conference in Egypt, which is of no surprise to anyone, because I participated both in the opening ceremony and on behalf of Barbados' national statement. But in truth and in fact, the real work in Egypt not only is done in the corridors, but is continuing even as we speak. And we expect that by tomorrow we shall have a draft text, and that we will begin to see elements in there in terms of the formal things that we want. Barbadians have heard me speak in recent times about the Bridgetown Initiative, which is really the culmination of us addressing firsthand the issue of the financing and the things that we must do in order to adapt to this new climate reality. It is of significance that while we were there, either on the way to Sharm el-Sheikh or while we were there, both two CARICOM states, Belize was hit by a tropical storm, and St. Lucia was badly affected, as we all know, by flooding. And this is, of course, in addition to what was also happening in South Africa and other areas, all in this last week to do with climate. I raise these things because one of the things we've been able to do is to identify funding to be able to start to deal with some of these issues. One of them you know about already. Barbados is the only country in the Caribbean, certainly among the Commonwealth, that has, in the Caribbean Commonwealth, that has received any grant funding for resilience and adaptation in this last going down of the Green Climate Fund. I think many of you media practitioners carried a story on the Green Climate Fund, giving the Barbados Water Authority a grant of 80 million Barbados dollars in circumstances where that would not have happened unless we have engaged and negotiated. What we were able to do in Egypt as well is to advance significantly the second project, which is the establishment of a blue-green financing facility so that we can provide financing to governments as well as institutions and private entities in order to be able to become more resilient and to adapt to the climate crisis going forward. And we expect that now to go to the board of the Green Climate Fund in either March or June next year. The board meetings only happen once every 3 months, and we were able to continue the discussion significantly while in Egypt. In addition to that, we've been able to get a lot of momentum for the first time on loss and damage. We make the point all the time that we have not caused the greenhouse gas emissions that are causing us all these problems. We know what it is to be on the front line of the crisis last year with Hurricane Elsa and with the freak storm. We know what it is to have the convection type rain in the afternoon now that we never had before. And in each instance, we make the point that there needs to be a pool of funds there that is not money that we have to borrow, but that is money that we will have access to help us recover from an event, grant resources. That's not going to happen with us twiddling our nose. This is the subject of some of the most difficult and hardest negotiations. And let me put it in context. There have been discussions on this issue of loss and damage since 2016 with the Paris Agreement. That is when small island states were promised, come on board with the agreement, you get loss and damage funds, among other things. You get $100 million in adaptation funds. Well, neither of the two developed. But in the meantime, we are facing the consequences of the crisis year by year by year. And therefore, the discussions in Egypt centered around that as it relates to the Bridgetown initiative specifically. And I really do hope that members of the media will take time not just to report that I speak about a Bridgetown initiative or that others will speak about it, but to educate Barbadians about it, because it is there. And people need to understand that, and I spoke to some of it in my Mandela speech on Saturday, that these are things that are going to make the difference, Wendy, to whether your boys are going to have an opportunity in this country to be able to do the things that the government would want for them to do. But if the government is spending all its money trying to recover from a hurricane or a flood every few months or a drought, there's going to be no money left back to do the other things that are part and parcel of the development process. And the Bridgetown initiative is simply about recognizing that we need to resolve the financing issues, because without that, you can kiss it all goodbye. And it's just a case of when you're going to fall down. So that I really do hope that we'll take the time to do it. What is good about Egypt? President Macron of France has come fully on board in indicating that he's prepared to sit down with a council of wise people in order to be able to see what elements of the Bridgetown initiative can be carried forward in terms of, one, increasing the level of multilateral development banks like the World Bank and other regional development banks so that they can lend to countries like Barbados, Bahamas, Maldives, all of whom are not entitled to borrow a single cent at concessional rates from the World Bank, because technically we've graduated because our per capita income is higher than other countries. But the reality is that Bahamas is still getting hit. Bahamas was threatened as recent as this week again. Barbados is still getting hit. The Maldives is still under serious threat of islands falling below sea level and settlements having to move completely. So these issues are real, and we hope that over the course of the next 6 to 12 months that we will see significant progress on it. I've made the point over and over that we cannot finance development, education, healthcare on 7-year money or 10-year money, no more than you can, Colville, buy a house on 7-year money unless you got serious savings put down. Most people in this country need 20, 25, 30 years in a mortgage because it is a long-term investment. Similarly, education, similarly, healthcare. So that took care of Egypt. There are obviously other discussions that took place in the sidelines that are of major significance to us. And in addition to that, it transitioned us into Rwanda, where perhaps the biggest game changer since we have come to office is about to unfold. And we've been working on it very quietly for since April, so that's last 6 months or so. And that is addressing the issue of pharmaceutical equity and creating a platform for jobs, investment, and earnings for a pharmaceutical industry in Barbados for the first time. I'm not sure if people understand how complex it is to establish the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals. First and foremost, the regulatory framework is extremely complex, and that is the first thing that we will be engaged in over the course of the next 9 to 12 months or so. But without prejudice to that, through cooperation with Rwanda and President Kagame, with the European Union, and President von der Leyen herself came to the event. The European Investment Bank, President of the European Investment Bank himself, President Hoyer, came to the event. The President of Guyana, because Barbados and Guyana have to do it together. No single country can do it alone. In the case of Africa, it is Rwanda and Ghana doing it there, and the groundbreaking for them took place in June of this year. And, of course, the Director General of the World Health Organization, whom we know well in Barbados now, Dr. Tedros, who has helped us out tremendously through the WHO in the last 2 years, and the head of the Susan Buffett Foundation, who is also interested in being able to assist us with respect to boosting our capacity to be able to manufacture pharmaceuticals. This has been a major, major, major achievement for a small state like Barbados to be able to locate itself at the center of the Americas as a location for the development of a pharmaceutical industry. After the announcement and the joint communique, indeed it is fair to say that we've had a number of requests trying to find out more about it to fuel the private sector investment. We will create the regulatory framework for these things to happen. What is at stake is potentially at least 4,000 to 5,000 jobs in the next 4 to 5 years in Barbados. But the platform for it has started from as early as April of this year. And the fact that the joint communique involved the President of the European Union Commission, the President of the European Investment Bank, the President of Rwanda, the President of Guyana, the Director General of the WHO, the head of the Susan Buffett Foundation, and myself tells you that this is not speculative, that this is serious work in action. And that was the purpose for us to continue to go to Rwanda. I should tell you that the head of the Rwandan Food and Drug Administration has already been in Barbados 6-7 weeks ago, I believe it was, and the preliminary work meeting with their own people in the drug service and the Ministry of Health has already started. We have now to engage and to put the rest of the regulatory framework in place, and then once that happens, we then monitor and deal with the identification of the space for the pharmaceutical part. In fact, that will happen on a parallel track, because the kind of infrastructure that has to be put in to facilitate pharmaceutical industry is significantly different. As you would appreciate, you need steam, you need water at temperatures that are beyond anything that you would normally have in an industrial park. You need all kinds of sterile environment, etc. So this is a highly complex engagement. But why are we doing it? Barbados has produced your children, our children, 6,000 graduates at the Cave Hill campus of the University of the West Indies in the last 5 years. When I was last Minister of Economic Affairs and Development in 2007, I produced a draft plan then that spoke to the need for us to rest our industrial development on two things, on pharmaceuticals and ICT. I don't need to tell you how important, therefore, this is to give our graduates choices. You've heard me say over and over that teaching is one of the most noble of professions, but we don't have enough teaching spaces to accommodate 6,000 science graduates. So unless we create the opportunities for them, or unless they go into self-employment, it's not going to happen. And the government, therefore, has set about, specifically through international partnership and opportunities, and I believe we will be having some discussions also with the private sector arm of the World Bank on these matters in the upcoming days. It's not going to happen by serendipity. And you know, if we were only to rely on what is available within Barbados to produce growth in Barbados, then we will not get very far. And I'm not going to fool anybody. I'm too old and have too much grey hair in my head to fool anybody about that. And those who doubt it only need to go back and see what happened to the economy in 2020 when people stopped coming and money stopped spending from inside Barbados. There was a contraction of this economy by 14%. And we're not going to get what we need if we only rest ourselves in Bridgetown or Christchurch, St. Philip or St. Lucie. It is going to take going out there, selling our country, creating the opportunities for our citizens, and being able to make that return on investment that's necessary. Bottom line is that Kerry will speak to the other initiatives in Rwanda as well, because he took the front line on a number of them, including the Air Services Agreement, etc., and we'll update you on those matters. And then we went on to South Africa. And as fate would have it, the Mandela Foundation chose for the first time to hold the Mandela lecture in KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, where President Mandela voted for the first time, and indeed where Mahatma Gandhi and others and the formation of the African National Congress took place. All of that is nice politically, but that's not what also should concern us. KwaZulu-Natal has two major things: sugar and tourism. So I don't need to tell you who KwaZulu-Natal mirrors in terms of its economic activity. And like Barbados, it has its first female premier, and we were able to discuss at length cooperation, but particularly in boosting technical capacity in tourism, because Barbados is a mature tourism destination. And you've heard me say that over and over. And it is going to require serious transformation if we are to make tourism capable of delivering to us in the next decade or two going forward in the way in which it delivered to us in the past. People have choices where to go. People have choices where to spend their money. And we need to make sure that we are among the top choices that people will make when it comes to these things. As I said, Kerry will speak to the airlift issue. The two other meetings in in Egypt that I need to refer to, we've also reached a very good agreement with Scotland in principle for us to work. The First Minister and myself have agreed that Scotland will help provide Barbados with technical assistance in the area of offshore wind, which, as you know, is a strength of Scotland. And we have limited technical capacity in this area, but we have studies that point to the fact that we ought to be pursuing it very aggressively, particularly to transition into also green hydrogen, and without prejudice to that, our own natural gas offshore for blue hydrogen. And similarly, we met, therefore, as a result, with the president of COP28 and also the other officials from the UAE with respect to similar interests in the offshore wind and in hydrogen. So that all in all, I think that we are, and I've given you not all of the detail, but a large part of it in order to be able to rest the public's mind, because there's a point at which the country can become consumed with distractions rather than remaining focused in this very serious thing. I had the opportunity, obviously, to meet also with the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund and with other major financial players in terms of Barbados' own circumstances. Look, next year is going to be a very difficult year globally. And don't fool yourself about it. I think everyone will tell you that potentially next year can be worse than what we've had this year. It doesn't mean that it is going to be worse for us, but it means that we have to operate with laser-like precision to be able to get ahead and to do those things for this country that will insulate this country as much as possible from what is going to be a very, very difficult year next year. There are a number of countries. Let's start with the United Kingdom. How many of us in this room expected the United Kingdom to be on the verge of having a major austerity budget within 48 hours now? How many of us, on top of the United Kingdom, expected Ghana, who was doing very well and whose Minister of Finance was my predecessor in the as chair of the Development Committee 2 years ago? Ghana is now on the verge of a major debt crisis. Kenya, I can go through, there are about 55 countries in the world because of the strengthening of the US dollar, because of the disruption in the supply chain, because of the tightening that is coming about, because central banks are deliberately raising interest rates in order to suppress activity to bring prices back down. Because as we've spoken over and over again, you can't run ahead of these prices. And inflation is like a cancer. It is eating you out. Same First Minister of Scotland today makes the point that her budget has already had eaten out of it because of inflation, £1.7 billion for this year already. If I were to extrapolate in the case of Barbados, and I'm not an economist, but effectively with a budget of about 3.3 billion, 3.8 billion, in expenditure, and with inflation running at anywhere between 8-9%, depending on what month you're looking at, you work out and see what the cost of goods and services will have increased for the government of Barbados alone. And that things that we might have set out wanting to do at the beginning of the year, you can't necessarily do, but you have to keep your eyes on the prize of growth. Because if you don't trigger growth, then the inflation is going to be even worse on you in terms of your ability to get it out. Now, suppressing the economic activity is supposed to help tame the prices. And we have to wait and see what will happen and how long this crisis will last for. But suffice it to say that perhaps bigger than all of that is the concerns that I have on crime. I spoke to them before I left the country at the annual conference. I put arrangements in place with respect to changes both at the ministerial level and initiatives that we discussed with the police service that they have now, and I will take a briefing from them as to what they've started to implement with respect, but they will take time to implement the measures that have only been announced 2.5 weeks ago. And therefore, I need the country also to recognize, as I said, that this is not the battle of any one group, not the police, nor the government, nor civil society alone. This is a battle that is going to require the entire cooperation and effort of the majority of right-thinking Barbadians. And not in a week or a month or even a year. It is going to have to be sustained. Because whether we like it or not, guns don't walk and talk on their own, do they? It's people that use the guns. Guns are an inanimate object. And at the end of the day, the first thing we need to do is, one, be able, yes, to reduce the flow of guns, two, get what guns we have there, but three, also start to deal with the mindset of those who believe that it is okay to kill somebody. Because the last time I checked, I don't see a dead person walk or talk. And therefore, what we're doing is literally taking people's lives out without an appreciation of it. And when you hear some of the reasons why, it just doesn't add up. So that this is not an overnight fix. And if I look at the victimology, I leave it out there for you to draw your own conclusions. 70% of the people are between the ages of 20 and 35, with the majority between the ages of 25 and 35. Now, where were these people 5 years ago? These were the same people 5 years ago when we came into office. I said to you that the fact that these people have left school, many of them, and have not had a job for years, that they're not going to develop a culture of wanting to go to work overnight, just so. The bottom line is that these are the people who suffered from us not paying sufficient attention either to qualitative reforms in education or economic opportunities and post-secondary training in this country. Now, when they left school, the opportunities for training weren't there, the opportunities for jobs weren't there. Now, having said that, the reality is that we have allowed other social structures to intrude, to undermine our own, and we haven't counted it sufficiently. When last have you seen a community group formed in your community? When last have you seen a sporting group formed in your community? When last have you seen older persons take the time 2-3 days a week to go to a cricket club or a football club and mentor some of these young people and try to make sure that they're there for them when things are happening? When last has a mother been telling and reaching out, and the police have to create confidential spaces, even more than they have already, for people to be able to say, look, I worried about my child, or I worried about the things that in my house. Because at the end of the day, The only way we got through COVID is how? Fighting together as one. Not just government alone, not Ministry of Health alone, but all of us together. So I will continue to engage with the public, but I'll take the proper briefings from the police and to see where we are. And as they require the support, it is one of the most important things on our minds, separate from, obviously, the continued maintenance of the public health safety and the other things necessary to keep body and soul together in this country. Kerry, I don't know if you want to speak to the Rwandan aspect again before I open up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps before I go to Rwanda, let me just start by addressing a couple of the mischiefs that have been put out there, because the Prime Minister did not speak to them, but I think it is very important that we do. First of all, the question, and obviously one follows these things from overseas, the question of the cost of travel and associated with travel and the size of delegation, etc., is a very important issue that we have to address head on. First of all, let me make it abundantly clear that the delegation that went to Egypt, in fact, before we go to Egypt, let me start with England, where, as Prime Minister indicated, we would have had a night at the World Travel Market at the very start of World Travel Market. Why is that important? Prime Minister and myself attended, the two of us alone, because of the fact that there's a new tourism minister who had to be introduced to stakeholders. Barbados' tourism, as you will have heard me say repeatedly, represents approximately 45% of this country's GDP prior to COVID. And it is necessary for us to take stakeholders into our confidence, rebuild an understanding between ourselves and them so that they are perfectly clear that we are reopened for business and are on the same track in terms of interest in investment and expansion of the tourism product as they are. And therefore, building that bridge and creating a new relationship between ourselves and Minister Gooden Edgell was vitally important. We left there and went to Egypt. I want to say that the Egyptian delegation obviously was larger than just the Prime Minister and myself, but it was also paid for by the Inter-American Development Bank and the UN Foundation for Climate Change. In addition to some contribution from the government of Barbados. And why? The government of Barbados is seen as a leading voice for small island developing states on the matter of climate change. Though a lot of people in Barbados do not apparently understand or take it for what it is at face value, the Prime Minister of this country is sought after as one of the leading voices in the movement and fight against climate change. And as you heard her indicate just now, at the conference of the parties, President Macron himself, who is one of the leaders of the most, I suppose, influential countries in the world, would have wanted to associate himself with the Bridgetown Initiative and the leadership of the Prime Minister of Barbados. So it is vitally important that we did that, and that even after we left, there were people on the ground continuing meetings, continuing negotiation, and as Prime Minister indicated, the discussions would have gone above and beyond just simply the question of the environment, but also the question of energy, the relationships we have with countries like Scotland, who will help us get to where we want to get with offshore wind investment in Barbados, the relationships that we're trying to build with countries like the United Arab Emirates, where we would want to use their technologies in helping our energy sector as well. We left Egypt via a plane sent to us by the president of Rwanda at no cost to the government of Barbados. And we would have spent 3 days in Rwanda. Calder, do not laugh, I'm very serious about it. The plane was sent to us in Egypt for us to travel to Rwanda by the president of Rwanda at no cost to the people of Barbados. While in Rwanda, a lot of very important business was discussed. And let me just go through a few of the things, because we would have done an air services agreement, and that is obviously vitally important. It is my view, it is the Prime Minister's view, and I think the government as a whole stands aligned behind this idea that we cannot forever box ourselves into the corner of being a warm weather getaway for people from the Northern Atlantic. There is a lot of room for heritage tourism. There is a lot of room for cultural linkages in tourism. And we have to therefore explore every opportunity that is available with respect to the African continent. In Rwanda, the Air Services Agreement between ourselves and them has established the rights which would be accredited to every airline on either side. From us, we would have to name an airline which would be flying representing Barbados' interests into Rwanda, and equally on their side. And they have chosen, obviously, Air Rwanda. We have no airline, so that is a matter that we will have to work through. But the fact of the matter is the issue of not just passenger travel, but cargo movement is vitally important. Now, that would have been taken care of with respect to the Air Services Agreement. Very closely aligned to that is the question of the African AGRA. It is called AGRA, African Green Revolutionary Agriculture. It is a concept in which the African countries have come together to create a continental vision on the future of agriculture. This is something that we desperately need to do ourselves in Barbados. Permit me to be very real with you all. It is a source of deep, I suppose, embarrassment that you would be having discussions with serious people in a country like Rwanda, and online in Barbados, our folks are treating this as something that you make fun at and that you are prejudiced about. And we have to be more serious about ourselves, in my respectful view, than this. The fact of the matter is that the African governments have come together to do something that we ourselves are struggling to do, and are offering us an opportunity to participate as the sixth division of the African community. And what does this mean? It means that there will be, first of all, financing opportunities extended to farmers in Barbados and across CARICOM. Barbados will be the bridge that allows for the funding to come into the region. It means equally that there will be opportunities for development of women's entrepreneurial interests in agriculture, so that a sector that has long been excluded in agriculture or underdeveloped in agriculture is now going to be given direct technical assistance trying to uplift the opportunities for females in agriculture. It means equally that youth in agriculture benefit from a similar type of technical assistance, because female entrepreneurship and youth entrepreneurship in agriculture are at the foundation of this AGRA effort. And above and beyond that, it means the introduction of technology into our agricultural sector. And why do we want more technology? Because it means more efficient planting of seeds and crops. It means better protection of crops, because you're using drones and so on to protect the crops. It means taking our technology to a level where taking our agriculture to a level where we've never been able to go before. Above and beyond the AGRA component of it is the question, of course, of where we go with the same young people Prime Minister made reference to in terms of training. The Carnegie Mellon Institute is a world-class university out of the United States of America. It has one campus outside of the US, and it is in Africa. They are doing substantially good work with respect to training young people in Africa in Masters of Science programs, in Rwanda especially, yes, it's located in Rwanda. Masters of Science programs where they are doing robotics, where they're doing coding, where they're doing artificial intelligence. As you just heard Prime Minister say, we have 6,000 graduates who come out of the University of the West Indies with science qualifications every 5 years. But again, we need now to translate that into concrete commercial opportunity, concrete economic development opportunity for these young people. And the arrangement that we are trying to put in place and have had meaningful discussion with the Carnegie Mellon University in Rwanda is to have Barbadian students being able to go up there in order to participate in the training at that campus, so as to put themselves in a position where they can qualify in artificial intelligence and robotics and those kinds of studies. Unprecedented. I want to say also that we have to recognize the benefits that Barbados' government stands to get from partnership with a country like Rwanda, which is cutting edge in what they're doing. When I came from the meetings with Carnegie Mellon and their Minister of Information and Science and Technology in Rwanda, I told Prime Minister that those folks in Rwanda right now are working on a program where a lady will go into a hospital and give birth to a child. Within 3 days, she'll come out of hospital and she will go home. And on arrival at home, there will be a kit. And that kit is going to carry the child's ID card. It is going to have a health policy for the child. It will have a bank account open for the child. It will have all of the social security requirements, passport, etc. for that child. Now, nowhere in the Caribbean is that possible. Nowhere in the Caribbean is that being done. So the reality is that while it is, I suppose, amusing to go on Instagram and talk about Wakanda forever and them kind of things, the truth of the matter is that country is a place where we need to look to for partnership in order to get us to be able to carry our people to that exacting standard of living and quality of life that we want to be able to deliver. And that's what that partnership and their agencies will be here next year in January to pursue that. Now, above and beyond that, we had some useful discussions with the Rwanda Business Development Corporation, which is the sister arm of the Export Barbados and Invest Barbados. And a team of Barbadians went to Rwanda on their own cost, at their own cost, not through the government of Barbados being subsidizing. But they went up there in order to participate in meetings with the Rwanda Business Development Corporation. As I understand it from the business people who we would have met, the conversations that they had and the opportunities for business were quite substantial. I will give you but one example. There is a person whose business is physiotherapy and that type of treatment, and he has now landed himself a contract with a hotel chain in Rwanda where he will now be able to expand his services from Barbados into Rwanda, but working as a consultant across the hotel chain in Rwanda to provide those services and obviously to move his skill sets and people that he employs over there in order to do that type of work. These are the opportunities that are unfolding. That's but one example of it. Above and beyond that, however, there are also opportunities for us in areas where we desperately need to go. Prime Minister made the point repeatedly at the Conference of the Parties that access to certain technologies in our effort to go where we wish to go in the renewable energy exercise is frustrated because you simply do not have, for example, the electronic vehicles. So in March last year, Prime Minister would have stood on the floor of Parliament and created a 2-year window where you have virtually no taxes on the importation of electric vehicles, but we all know we can't get them in Barbados. We know that to be a fact. I've told you repeatedly that the Light and Power has reported to the country that they are not in a position to get their hands on the batteries that we need for battery storage, which are critical if we are going to use the photovoltaic panels and so on as part of the revolution in energy supply in this country, because energy has to be stored if you're going to have grid stability. But these things can be manufactured in the South. We forever cannot be reliant on the countries of the North Atlantic. And so part of the partnerships being discussed with Rwanda is to use manufacturing capacity there and to extend that manufacturing capacity in the same way that we are doing it with pharmaceuticals and related products into areas with regard to renewable energy devices and technology. So those are the conversations that we have had. And I think there may have been one or two others that do not immediately come to mind. But we left Rwanda, and again, by the president's plane, not at the cost of the Barbados government. They were good enough to send us on to South Africa, where the Prime Minister did the Nelson Mandela lecture. And as she has indicated, in KwaZulu-Natal, the birthplace of the ANC, the African National Congress, their premier has made it clear that partnership with Barbados is something that they seek with respect to tourism and tourism development. Now, again, this is an opportunity for us to play a role that we've never played because we are being asked to use our experience, our expertise, our skills in the leading industry that we have in this country and to sell those services across the pond into Africa in order to help them develop their tourism skills. And this is something, again, as I said, that we should feel proud about. So that I observed from a distance some of the types of conversation that were taking place. I feel a little bit saddened because I do not feel that in this time of international crisis, we should be resorting to the instinct of prejudice and xenophobia when there's so much good work that can be done by forging partnerships with people who come from us or who we come from, who share a common heritage with us and who are anxious to close that bond once again. As the Prime Minister continues to say, that we leave out the middle leg and the middle passage and remove the scars that have been associated with those years of agony. And I think that's basically what I would want to say by way of report, Prime Minister.
Any questions? You don't sit down, Skipper, because you may.
Madam Prime Minister, Colville Monday Nation News. Let me first say that you address both frontally and comprehensively the rationale behind the trips in terms of the cost-benefit aspect of it. However, there was another component of the criticism as it relates to the length of time and the time frame. Many were saying that it comes at a time when the country needed reassurance from the leader of the country vis-a-vis the issue with crime, etc., cost of living. How would you respond to those critics, Madam Prime Minister?
As I indicated earlier, if we relied only on what we produced in Barbados to be able to get us out of this situation, we would never get out. I have confidence in my Deputy Prime Minister who acted as Prime Minister. I have confidence in the institutions of this country. And let us be clear, there are always going to be 3 or 4 times a year when we are going to have to be on the road engaging with people. And this is not now, Colville. This has been throughout government. And the first thing you know that you must do and I do is context. So that when does the Conference of Parties for the greatest crisis known to mankind happen? It doesn't happen in August. It doesn't happen in January. It happens at the beginning of November. And whether we like it or not, I would much rather it happen in October, quite frankly, or the beginning of September, because then I could take the whole month out between the UN and the COP and do everything then. But we don't get to set it. We are participants in an international process. As it related to the Mandela lecture, they asked me when was a convenient date, and instead of coming back to Barbados to go back to Africa again, I indicated please set the date immediately after Egypt, so that I would be in a position not to cost anybody the time or the money that would otherwise be unreasonable. And let me say that in a number of these things, in South Africa, on the side of it, there was a delegation from the Maryland State Assembly. And I mean, Alex will tell you, and discussions have continued there in terms of what else can be done. Opportunities are created through engagement, and we all know it. Now, we can choose to either be here and get lost in it, or we can choose to step back and look at the whole picture and give context. And this government, from day one, has chosen to do that. If at the end of the day we don't deliver, then the public will do what it needs to do. But as long as we have the mandate to deliver, we have to deliver. And we can't deliver only by looking within 166 square miles.
As a follow-up question, Prime Minister.
And for the record, the Conference of Parties, I've chosen not to stay there for the whole time or for a long period of time. It's a 2-week conference. It's a 2-week conference. And some of the most technical and detailed discussions are taking place, so that I'm actually working day and night, because with the time frame, they're reporting back to us asking for mandates and what to do in terms of negotiations. And because Barbados has been so pivotal in putting, let me give you an example. You heard us talk about Barbados being the largest issue of natural disaster clauses in the world. God forbid if we get hit again in a serious way, we will be able to unlock through what this government put in place with our natural disaster clause, the equivalent of $1 billion US, 2 billion Barbados dollars almost, 1.8, 1.9 over a 2-year period, by not having to pay our debt service, and we back-end it at the end of the loans. The United Kingdom this week announced for the very first time that their export credit agency will now adopt similar clauses to the Barbados natural disaster clauses in their instruments. You understand? We went to the market in September and issued blue bonds, and in it we put not only the natural disaster clause but a pandemic clause, so that if there's a future pandemic again issued by the World Health Organization and we spend above a certain amount, I think in this case it's about 20 million Barbados, then we also get on that particular bond to be able to pause our debt service in there. So there are a number of things that are wrapped up in this, and if I were to look at this only in terms of hours or days, it would be looking at you for a whole day and say, Carvel, how many stories you write today? Oh, you only write one story today? Well, you ain't doing the work for the 8 hours? You don't measure it like that. You know it and I know it. So help me help educate the Barbadian public instead of forcing them down a rabbit trap that makes them start to use metrics that will only put the country 6 foot under rather than lifting the country up.
You, both yourself and Minister Simmons, mentioned pretty much a long list of agreements, some of which, based on just the cost we mentioned, seem to be in its preliminary stages. Do you have any timelines you can give us as to?
I think I did. I told you the Blue-Green Investment Facility is going to the board of the Green Climate Fund either in March or June next year. We expect that to reap benefits for it. With respect to the pharmaceutical framework, I've also told you that the next 9 months is going to be spent on completing the regulatory process, while at the same time, those of us required to look at the infrastructure developments for the pharmaceutical life sciences park will start to do that, because that is going to require both financing and investment. That is a government responsibility, as opposed to the investments from the pharmaceutical companies themselves, which is a private sector investment. But in order to facilitate the interests, we've got to get both regulation and infrastructure coming together like that now in one. With respect to the Rwandan air and the air services, I think that we've all agreed that over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, we would like to see some kind of action. And I'm not going to put a timeline specifically on it. Suffice it to say that both the president of Rwanda and myself have indicated to both sides the urgency of being able to look at the market. And it goes beyond Barbados, because there's likely to be a West Africa destination and possibly a North American destination involved in it in order to be able to make it real and sustainable going forward. and I think we also agreed that we will work with the Africa Exim Bank, who Barbadians should be familiar with now because of the first Africa-Caribbean Trade Investment Forum that took place here at the end of August, early September. All of these things are... Yeah, their business community will be in Barbados in the first few months of next year as well. Remba, which is their digitization agency, etc., will be in Barbados in January, helping us to continue to expand our digitization framework. So there are timelines for almost everything. The only one I can't give you the timeline for is the AGRA, because Kerry did that while I was doing something else. So pretty much I'm comfortable. With respect to the Bridgetown initiative, we expect, and I may have to go with President Macron, and we may have to be engaging with members of Congress. We've just seen what has happened in the U.S. Senate there. Why? Because if Barbados is to get benefits further from the concessional funding to pay at, in the World Bank's case, 3-4% as opposed to 10 and 12%. Work out the numbers on $100 million at 10-12% as opposed on the market, as opposed to 3-4% in concessional lending. And the difference in interest that we save is money that will go into the Youth Advance Corps, is money that will go into the social programs that we want to do on the ground. So that's all I want us to do.
Ricardo Roberts from Starcom Network.
Sorry, what's your name?
Ricardo Roberts, sorry.
Thank you.
From Starcom Network. I know you spoke a bit about the crime situation. We came out of a press conference a couple of days with the heads of the police talking about the issue that the country was confronted with and the recent spate of shootings. I must say that the country did not feel reassured after that press conference because there wasn't no real commentary. Well, we didn't hear as much as they couldn't go into detail as to the strategy. The country felt let down by what was being purported. As head of the National Security Council, I'm just wondering what is going to be the approach to deal with especially this gun violence. We have to look at the elephant in the room. The island is porous, and we're seeing an influx of guns and so on. I think the country needs to hear really how this administration is going to tackle the gun situation that we are facing. And we also have to admit that while we want to work at a community level, there seems to be a disconnect with the relationships with the community groups and those who are among these groups who are causing the situation in the country right now.
Were you in Barbados 2-3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Okay. You heard when I spoke about what were the initiatives we're doing for the police?
I believe that, yeah.
No. So therefore, the government did outline a plan with respect to the police force strengthening, correct?
Right.
Do you want me to repeat it?
No, you don't have to, but
Okay,
I was just saying.
because you don't, the way you asked the question suggests that the government has said nothing, and I beg to disagree. And in fact, I become expansive on the matters to deal with alternatives on the ground socially because I can do so expansively. On operational matters, that is a matter for the Commissioner of Police. Now, I can't tell you what the response of the public was, but if you say it is that, I accept your word. And the police will have to address that themselves because it will be a dangerous thing in this country when a prime minister or a minister in charge of the police can direct police on operational matters. So on operational matters, we leave that to them. Having said that, all of us will expect the police to be fully engaged and doing their job. My understanding is that the Commissioner of Police was on leave, that he has subsequently cut his leave short, is back in office on the ground, working as of yesterday, and therefore was, I'm told that he was not the one who spoke on Thursday, was he? So I think you need to leave that to the police, and I think we need to also give them the space and capacity to do their job while at the same time appealing to Barbadians to work with them. This is not about any one of us. This is about the entire well-being of the country. You said something, though, that caused me to believe that you are of the view that guns are only now coming in. And I'd like you to go back and go into the Nation Library and look for the front page or the back page of the paper that had both the then Commissioner of Police, Mr. Griffith, and the then Attorney General, Mr. Adriel Brathwaite, talking about guns coming through the ports. We were the most shocked people when we came to office to find the state of lack of security at the ports that we found. I've made and said enough, including 2 Saturdays ago, that I have not yet seen guns that are biodegradable. And therefore, once they come in, they're going to be there rusty or good or well-oiled or functioning or not. And the reality is that what we are now reaping is what we've sown over a period of time. Now, it's not Barbados alone, and let's get context too. You have a United States of America that has gone crazy. And we have to get a hemispheric approach to ban assault weapons because the truth is it is the automatic weapons that create even greater fear more than anything else because a one shot is a one shot. But when a man can let go in seconds, that is what is causing the problem. And the reality is that through every Caribbean country, throughout every Central and Latin American country. But above all else, worse than that, in the United States of America that is responsible for the manufacturing, this is what we're facing. So we can't solve the problem only by dealing with it, but we must deal with that. And that is why even the truth verification at the ports, I'm deeply upset that it's taken as long as it has to do it. I've spoken internally about it. Everybody who works in a sensitive position has to make up their mind that they have to be subject to dons. That's what it is. That to whom much is given, much is expected. And that is there. So I want you and others in the media to work together with the country, not with me, not with the government. Because when we keep saying things without remembering what has been put in place, or without working together to put and channel things, then we're only undermining the very ground that the police and others have to walk on. I'm satisfied that over the course of time, you hear what I just said? This is not next week, next month, next year, even Colville. This is steady course. I gave you what happened. I gave you the stats just now about people 25 to 35. How old were they when we came to office 5 years ago? How old were they? They would have been between 20, you understand, and 30. Roll back, how old were they when last we were in office? And I don't want to be political, but the reality is, and I'm not going to be, but I can't avoid the facts. If you underinvest in certain areas, this is what you naturally get out. And when we kept saying in opposition that we need to put more in education, that we need to put more in training, this government has come in. We established a National Transformation Initiative in the middle of an IMF program. We went and we reintroduced all post-secondary training and tertiary training for free. Okay, since the numbers that were 40% down have gone back up to above where they were. All of these are things that we have done even in an IMF program. But whether we like it or not, the genie was out of the bottle already. And the only people who can bring it back is who? The entire population working together, because 166 square miles is all that we have. This is not 16,600 square miles. So we have to work together to be able to reason with the handful of people who are causing the problems, because it is still a handful as compared to the rest of the population. The problem is that they have weapons that are causing the fear, and these weapons are automatic weapons. And the police, the cases that have to be brought, that's why I asked you if you heard what I said. We're increasing the judges, increasing the prosecutors, increasing the community police, increasing the numbers of police overall, increasing the training for the police. And let's be real. We have a police force that was gutted. Gutted. You took out a commissioner for the first time in independent Barbados, and you put him one side. And why? Because that commissioner and his successor, both of them complained that the people who they recommended for promotion were rejected by the Police Services Commission. Now, how do two successive commissioners of police recommend people under their command who they see work every day and know how they work? And a Police Services Commission chaired by a person who coincidentally was also the General Secretary of the Democratic Labour Party does not accept them. And in one instance led to the government having to pay out significant sums of money for breach of process and breach of Administrative Justice Act. I would like you all to do the research and the context, because we are unfairing our people and we're not allowing us to come together and to make the decisions that we ought to be making, but are being distracted with a lot of salacious comment and commentary and about who is interfering. There is no official in this country, to my knowledge, political or otherwise, who is stopping or insulating anybody from being arrested, pursued, or anything in this country. And I make that absolutely clear without fear of contradiction. So let us please, to the task. I'm not going to give you salacious comment or talk to you just off the top of my head for the sake of doing it. I have too long a history in this country working with these matters. But in addition to that, I have also a responsibility to keep my head on when others are not prepared to keep theirs on. And the first thing that involves is making sure that the functioning of the police force can go without interference, but with the necessary support. We have given them more support than any other government has given them. Secondly, our responsibility is to make sure that the court system is working. We put in the additional judges, and lo and behold, what happened? Boom, boom, COVID. 2 years of no jury trials called. Well, how many you went and covered? None. Because there were none. So that how much ever we put additional judges in place, the very thing that we were on the process of knocking down got thrown back up in the air. And of course, judges will give people bail if they have been on remand for what? Excessively long periods of time. But that is how we end up then with the phenomenon. In my day, you couldn't get bail for murder when I was practicing law. Now you do. So you end up with people on bail with 2 and 3 and 4 murder charges. What do they have to lose? That's what the country is up against. So I really am appealing, whether I'm here or not, whether he is here or not, whether you are here or not, this is a problem that the entire country has to band together. And that's why I said, go back to what I said then, because I'm going to keep repeating it. But don't ask me to believe that, or don't cause people to believe that this is going to change overnight. It's going to be slogging. It's like losing weight. You understand? How much ever you want to lose fast, you still ain't going to sustainably lose it beyond 2 pounds a week. So you just got to make up your mind. If you want to lose 50, 60 pounds, it can take what? Time. Okay, we're trying to rebuild social capital. It will take time. And there are 2 fundamental reports that I've brought back out that I've given Corey Lane to look at, the National Commission on Law and Order, and the draft plan on justice, peace and security that I left there as AG. And I really hope that in spite of being in the IMF program, that's why I'm working so hard to try and get state-owned enterprise reform and try to get adaptation funds and resilient funds for climate so that I can find the money to put in to rebuild the social capital of this country. Because when we inherited the government, salaries were being paid and debt was being paid. Not a single program, not even fees of education. I've come in, I've done some of it, but for me to do more, I've got to amplify the funding that is available, particularly the grant funding. We've got to get the international community to change the concept of what is debt sustainability, and we've got to have access to cheaper money to borrow rather than having to borrow in the international markets, because all of these savings then allow me to put, as Minister of Finance, money behind other productive sectors, or to grow and create jobs, or behind social sectors. You with me?
Another
Thanks.
question too. Can you just give us an update on the plan to sell CBC, and also...
I wish I could. I haven't taken a brief on it. Suffice it to say that we put out expressions of interest twice since being in government. The first one led to nothing 2-3 years ago. We did it again a couple months ago. I think they're down to 2 bidders that they were in negotiations with. Because of the fact that it is a technical team negotiating, I'm not in a position to give you any statement as to where the negotiations are specifically, or whether they've recommended anybody to the line ministry yet or not. But suffice it to say, this is one case where you can't sell it in private. This is a case, as my father reminded me many years ago, when I was a teenager, you can hide and buy land, but you can't hide and work it. So the sale will have to be made known to the country, or a joint venture or whatever it is that is being recommended. But this is no secret, because remember, this comes out of the survey that was done back in 2018, when we decided that we were not going to devalue the Barbados dollar. But in order for us to keep it, we needed to be able to reform a number of state-owned enterprises. COVID once again, 2.5 years, push everything down the road. So we're just trying to deal with a number of entities in order to be able to create that space that we can spend on the social sector and reform the productive sectors where we have to. They'll come. And rest assured, I hope that the fervor that I'm hearing means that I'll see the media start to put some background pieces on these things and to provide context. Because honestly, that's what's also missing with the national discussion on too many of these things. That's why I asked you about the Bridgetown Initiative. Have you done a 5-minute thing on it? Have we done something on why the state-owned enterprises have to be reformed in order to take the money back in so that we can put the money in the Youth Advance Corps? There's nothing I would like more than to have the Youth Advance Corps whose objective is to take a third of the school leavers in this country and put them into a 2-year program. Now, I've said already that whereas we started paying them a stipend of $600 a month, that if we're going to resume it, we're going to have to go down to $400 in order to make it sustainable to keep the 1,000, because unless we have scale to take 200 kids a year, 300 kids a year, is not going to make any difference. But when we take 1,000 kids a year out of 3,100 leaving school, then we're going to start to have a different conversation in this country. Okay?
Madam Prime Minister, if
Yes,
you
ma'am.
would permit me to ask a question
Please.
of the Foreign Minister. You spoke to a Barbadian being able to get some interest in Rwanda. I'm just wondering what some of the Rwandan business people would like to do in Barbados, and how much more exploratory work has to be done in the area of energy and agro before we can actively see business to business between the two nations.
Let me deal with the last one first. The, the exploratory work, both in agricultural related things and energy, is much like what Prime Minister has talked about with regard to the pharmaceuticals. We are trying to have South-South cooperation, which will allow us to have manufacturing capacity on both sides. I think obviously because there's a deeper formation of capital on the Rwandan side, that there would be an easier stepping stone towards having the industrial development. In some cases it's already started in Rwanda. What we now want to be able to do is to have similar types of campuses, manufacturing opportunities here in Barbados. Specific business relation interests that come out of Rwanda, a lot of it turns on the services sector of the economy. And again, obviously the tourism and hospitality side of this is something that Rwanda is desperately interested in learning about and being able to perfect. I need not tell you, it was only maybe 30 years or so ago that they would have gone through that horrific period of genocide. But they have come a long way since then. And their economy has become one of the more spectacular performers in Africa. And what they're now trying to do is, again, much like us, try to do more diversification. And the services sector is really where they're interested in. The financial side, international financial services, something that we do pretty well here. It's another thing that they're interested in doing. But for us, what we want to be able to do is to get the technical skill sets into Barbados so that we can use not just in manufacturing, but again, the technology platforms. I didn't say this to you just now, but I'll give you another example of one of the things that we're talking about. There is an interest in hosting young Barbadians to come into Rwanda, Barbadians who are using, designing apps, who are into software development, and to put them into an entrepreneurial program in Rwanda. It is anticipated that it would probably last about 2 years, but it would be an intense course whereby you're not just learning the technical skill sets in terms of improving your software development, but you're also learning principles of business. The entrepreneurial issues, the financial literacy and understanding issues, the management of business, that kind of thing, marketing, etc. And in that 2-year period, you will go in, you have an intense course, you have certain set targets that you have to meet in terms of performance, and then you're back out on your own, but equipped in a way that you would never have been equipped before.
And Have you identified which agencies you're going to onboard in terms of rolling that out?
The Invest Barbados, Export Barbados on our side, and the Rwandan Development Corporation on their side.
Now we have a final question from Colville.
Yes, final question for the Madam Prime Minister.
You sure?
He changed his mind. Yes, Madam Prime Minister, if we may return to the issue of gun inflows into Barbados. Now, this administration would have invested heavily in scanners and port security, etc. During the press conference last Thursday, the acting commissioner mentioned, and I think you would have alluded to it in response to an earlier question, the human element being an issue in the continuation of guns, or as he described it, guns that are not wanted on the streets of Barbados. How do you propose to...
That's but one of the issues. In terms of the truth verification process, that is, as I said, people who work in sterile environment will have to submit themselves to conditions of those that are necessary for that sterile environment. We have given the agencies a wide perimeter within which to deal with the unions, but it has to come to an end, and I've sent that message. Okay?
I just
Yes.
have clarification. You said 4,000 to 5,000 jobs will be created over the next 4 to 5 years, but on this side it's Barbados and Guyana. Is that Bajans and
No, that's on the Bajan side
Just
alone.
making sure.
Okay, and there's a reason for it. The companies that make the pharmaceuticals will not be the country in which it is bottled. And it's a very complex and very complex process. And that's why the European union support is critical. The Rwandan development, Rwandan Health and Drug Agency support is critical, but we will develop our own capacity in the Americas. There's also a very unique opportunity, which is why we're rushing so hard. And perhaps I should break it down. The pharmaceuticals that we're looking at is using the mRNA technology, which is primarily going to be used for cancer treatment, oncology treatment, but we'll have the capacity also to create and make vaccines, as we just saw with COVID, because of the manner in which that technology operates. That's why the COVID vaccine was developed so quickly, relatively speaking. And then, of course, there's a huge opportunity with women's reproductive health care, particularly with what is happening in the United States of America. And we would be foolish not to be able to see that as part and parcel of our mandate in terms of getting the pharmaceutical industry off the ground here.
When we had the COVID issue, we would have had to do some training. And I'm wondering if there's any specification or any advice you want to give to the same studies graduates, like what areas should they go and specify in?
No, I think that in some areas, some of them will want now to go into life sciences and pharmaceutical sciences, but some of them, as we discussed, ought to be looking also at ICT-related areas, robotics, etc. So between science and engineering, look, there's so much more we need to be doing and can be doing as a country. Barbados cannot survive on its own. We do not produce everything that we need or eat or will need even to function in jobs. And therefore, our relationship with the international community is critical. Our partnership with the international community on education, on regulatory matters, and on investment issues is also critical. And all the government is trying to do is to literally lift everything up to find partners here. If we can get Carnegie Mellon down here or a similar type of university down here, looking now not at the pharmaceutical side, but at the robotics and the engineering and the artificial intelligence side. The government has just taken a decision through the Student Revolving Loan Fund to be able to train 1,500 Barbadians in cybersecurity, with the opportunity of jobs being almost assured for them. And why are we doing it? Because at the end of the day, if a person having received that training can start off earning, I think it's about 60,000 Canadian a year to start, and the training is less than a year's training, in fact it's months training, then I don't only want 1,500 trained, I would like 15,000 if we could get that trained. And that's what I mean when I keep saying global citizens with Barbadian roots. When we were in London, one of the key people we met with is the head of government relations for Apple as well. So that all of these things. That's why I'm amused at a party that is not getting its act together, can find so much time to distract Barbadians about what Barbadians are getting and not getting. And you know, I was listening to something coming back on the plane, that there's an old proverb that if you leave a bird in a tree long enough, it's only a matter before the stone comes. Or our way of saying it in Barbados is that nobody don't pelt stones in an empty breadfruit tree or an empty mango tree. So once the rock's pelting, you know that something there. Any more questions? And I deliberately not capping them, Roy. Any more questions?
I went around before you came.
All right. But let me thank you. Look, Barbados is at an interesting place. The world is at an even more interesting place. We can make this journey, believe you me. And we have a lot of goodwill internationally and regionally and domestically. But we have to stay focused. We have to stay focused. And I'm not saying so as a politician. I'm not saying so as even Prime Minister. I'm saying so as Mayor Motley. We have to stay focused. There's not everything we're going to get right, but there's not a lot that we are getting right that people should remember too. And where we are as a country is significantly further ahead from where we were. Where we are on our way to being, we're on our way to seeing a number of things start to open up and mushroom for us now. And that is why I am so adamant on working. The one thing that will consume me is indeed trying to rebuild the social capital of this country and to make sure that those things that can threaten that brilliant future in the medium term are not allowed to threaten it. We cannot do it alone. We need the support of every Barbadian household and every right-thinking Barbadian to make that happen. By the same token, we need the appetite and passion of Barbadians to recognize that nobody owes us a living, and that if we want to compete out there to get jobs, to get better salaries, to get investments, then we got to up our game. And if we don't up our game, trust me, we're not going to get what we could otherwise get. So thank you very much. And I look forward, I think my schedule is such that I can see you all fairly regularly in the next few weeks. Thank you very much. Weeks as well. Thank you very much. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Thank you, Barbadians. We'll be back with you shortly again. Thank you. Bye-bye.